Hey everybody, welcome to our new series called
Parents of the Bible, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Ooh. And we are excited to get into the Bible and look over, for the next 7 to 8 days, look over different crazy, wonderful, and amazing stories in the Bible about parents and what we can learn from them. Because even if they're good parents or bad parents, we can learn.
Right, we can imitate or we can choose not to repeat that.
Yeah. So as we do that, we're going to just jump right in and get after it because we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to be starting in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. It's kind of where we start, but I would encourage you to start reading in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. Is that what it is?
I mean, you can just read all of chapter 2, 3, and 4 is where we're going with all of this. And so we didn't want to take up your time by making you listen to me read it.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at, Genesis 2, 3, and 4. And we're just kind of hit some highlights here.
So right now, God's already created the world, and it's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place, and He's created it for a good purpose, and that is He wants to create a place for man. Now, we have a list here of things that God does, and let's go ahead and read that.
Today we're looking at Adam and Eve and God being their parent.
Yeah, and we're going to go multi-generational on this.
We are, and then we're going to look at them being parents. And so,
if we're going to look at who's the best parent, let's go with God. So what does God do for man?
Well, in verse 7, we see that God formed him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how parenting starts, right? Is you make a child.
Yeah.
That's how it starts. And so we see that he...
all the way right there.
So then we see that he breathed into his nostrils, gave him life, right? And so then we see over in verse 8 that God planted a garden in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed.
Now that's very interesting because it reminds me a lot of like a new parents, first baby, and it's like, let's break the bank.
Yeah, he's preparing a place for them, and not just a good place, because Eden means delight.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a lot like a parent who goes and this is going to be the nursery. We're going to paint it. We're going to buy everything we need, and we're going to spend stupid big money over here for this kid, and we're going to get the right rocker and the right crib, and
everything has to be perfect.
Yeah, but like month 3 of the kid being here, half that stuff has dust on it.
Right, and you don't do the same usually for like kids.
The second
2, 3,
kid,
4, and
you're
5.
like, just use the sock drawer. Like, it's not a big deal anymore.
Yeah, and so they're in Eden, so we know that God plants the trees in Eden, and he gives them everything for food. And so again, we're seeing that not only do they have this place prepared for them, they also have all of their needs provided for them.
Yeah.
And so then we see that God puts them in the garden to work it and take care of it. And so not only do they have their needs met in this beautiful place, they have purpose.
Yeah.
And so then God's giving him knowledge as well, because he's saying, hey, don't eat from this tree, but you can eat from all of these. Like, that is knowledge. And then we see him fashion a woman and give him Eve.
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, like what better present is to get like a counterpart to like do life with and experience life like you do.
It wasn't that God just loved Adam, that he was happy for Adam to have a place, provision, and a calling. But he's also like, man, I want you to have companionship.
Yeah.
I want you to have somebody who can come and fulfill you and make you more in the image of me.
And who now you, because they're two, can be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah.
And you can create like I've been creating.
Yeah.
Like that's huge. And so everything's good at this point. Like everything's fantastic. God's great. He's doing all this stuff for Adam and Eve. It all looks beautiful.
I would say, and he would too, that it was good.
It was good.
It was good.
Yeah.
But then.
Chapter 3, guys.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, it's a bad deal. So if you're familiar with the story, you know the serpent comes up to Eve and is like, hey, like, did God really say don't eat that? And, you know.
And just like every snake in a bad Western movie, someone's about to get bit.
Yeah.
And it's one of those heartbreaking situations. And this is the fall of man. This is where we all start when it comes to the curse of sin and the brokenness that happens. It's this moment whenever Satan says, yeah, you're actually not mature.
Yeah. If you eat this, then you'll be like God. But like,
right
newsflash,
now,
they already were, guys. Like,
they were made in his image.
In his image. Like, that's the most like God you could be.
And he, Brandy has talked about this earlier with me. God walked with them day and night. And he was giving them knowledge. as
Yeah.
they were maturing to it.
Because they needed knowledge. Like, they needed to know how to grow things. I'm sure God taught them that, and how to take care of the animals and steward them. Like, he was giving them knowledge, but it was at his discretion.
Yeah. Understanding where they were, how he created them, and the development rate that they had, and he gave to them according to that.
Right. And we do this with our kids. Like, Ariel will be like, hey, Mom, I want to know about this. And I'll be like, ooh, how much do you want to know? Because I don't think you're ready for all of that information.
Right.
And she'll be like, tell me what you think I need to know. And I'll tell her, like, this much. And she'll be like, oh, stop. That's enough. I'm like, okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. And so the good father, let's run over it, prepared a place,
Yeah.
gave him a life, gave him a purpose, gave him the resources, gave him unity and friendship.
Gave him knowledge.
And then he's also given them, like you're saying, given them the knowledge, the wisdom as he sees according to their ability to retain it. And then the serpent comes in and says, you know what, if you eat of this thing, then you'll be like God.
Yeah. And you don't have to wait on him to give you all of that knowledge. You'll just have it.
And I think if you look at a
Nothing
teenager,
restricted.
if you look at a teenager, and I was the same way, it was just like, I so wanted to be the smartest. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a parent. I'm a full-grown person.
I want to have access to everything. I want to find out. It's like the restrictions on the computers and stuff. Like, what are they hiding? Is it good stuff?
Yeah. There
You
is
know?
this rebellious thing inside of every student, I think, that says, I want to know it all because I want to be a know-it-all. I mean, really, that's...
Right, because then people will think I'm smart and awesome and
They'll value
worthy.
my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's just not the biblical case. You should mature ask God, because he will give generously wisdom to those who ask him. But you do it according to how he hands it out. And so here they tried to accelerate it, and it caused sin. Because for them to get what they wanted, they had to disobey God.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it's bad.
Yeah, so that's what we see. They eat from the tree. They're not supposed to. In Hosea 6, verse 7, it says, it refers back to this, and it says that they broke the covenant and betrayed the trust, God's trust.
Wow.
Like, that's a whole different way of looking at that.
I want you to think about how many times, maybe as a parent, or maybe whenever you were a student, you remember those moments of trust being broken.
Yeah.
You were allotted to come you had a curfew, or you were allotted to have a phone or whatever it was, and you broke the trust because you're being dumb.
Right. You said you were one place and you were another.
Yeah. Or you're the parent and your kid did that. And there's this thing of like, okay, well, I can't trust you with that, so I'm going to now have to put up safeguards.
Right.
Because the thing I was entrusting you to honor, you broke.
Yeah.
And because of that, brokenness now is on you.
Right. And that's what we're going to see. First, you know, they do what they're not supposed to do. Well, then they hide. Well, then they play the blame game and they throw excuses of like, well, he made me do it. Well, she made me do it. You know, so that's classic kid stuff. You know, we see that we've not changed a lot as
This is a classic
humanity.
This is a classic. Who broke the lamp? And everybody's like, I don't know. I was talking
Well,
about
he
a
pushed
lamp?
me over.
Oh.
Like,
Is that a
whole thing.
lamp? Is that what
Yeah.
that is?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
It's like when you broke your mom's
We're not
camel.
talking about that. What? Stop. Don't bring up stuff like that. Good
It
grief.
was awful.
We need to realize that this thing that we're seeing Adam and Eve do, it's just teenage rebellion. I mean, really, when we come down to it. And I wouldn't even call it teenage because that makes it sound like they didn't know what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
Right.
I mean, we call it teenage rebellion, but I see an 80-year-old man who do the same thing. So it's not about an age thing. It's just about there's a spirit there that says, I'm going to do it because I want to do it.
Right. So we go on and we see that, like a good father, God disciplines his kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has to say, you know, for one, he provides for them because he sees that their little leaves that they've sewn together aren't going to cut it out in where they're going to have to go.
Right.
And so he provides animal skins for them to be adequate clothing. But then, go ahead.
Boy, that's a good one. Just because your kids mess up, and I've known people who like their kid messes up and it's like, well, I'm just going to cut them off everything.
Right. Like the love is even cut off. Like attention and everything is cut off.
Where what God does here is he says, you no longer are clothed in my glory because you broke my trust. And actually in a moment he's saying, you no longer can be in this intimate place with me.
Right.
You can't be in the garden with me anymore. But what I will do is I'll still be there. What I will do is I will clothe you in different clothes. Had a low battery thing. Had to fix that. I will clothe you in different clothes. I'll make preparations for you to be covered. Because of what you did, there's a cost.
Right.
And parents need to be able to articulate that to their kids. Because of the broken trust, there's a cost. And I'm going to pay part of it because I love you, but you're going to pay it. You're going to have to suffer with it. You're going to have to come to the place where you can build this back.
Yeah. And so we see that, like, in verse 23, it says, so God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. And so again, like, putting up those safeguards, like, you broke my trust and now I can't give you access to everything. This is no longer having free access the way we were is no longer the most beneficial for you.
Right.
Because you would keep sinning and doing it bigger and worse and escalating. And so I can't let you keep doing that, which is love from the Father.
Right. And I want to say this because there may be some parents that are out there struggling with this, and even some students that don't understand, but you need to hear this. If you have a child or a family member that comes into your house and is practicing sin in your house, is doing broken things in your house, if they're stealing money, if they're doing drugs, if they're drinking or whatever it is, if they're doing those things in your house and you allow it, it is not love.
Right. That's enabling.
That's enabling. Enabling is saying, I don't love you enough to have the hard conversation.
Right.
If you truly love somebody, you have the hard conversation. God has a hard conversation. He says, I'm not going to let you be here. Why? Because then you're going to eat of the fruit of eternal life and you will be forever broken. But I will not allow that to happen. I will remove you from this place before what you do is permanent.
Right.
And so this eviction out of the garden isn't about God not loving Adam and Eve. It was simply him saying, this is going to profit you more if I get you out today so you're not condemned forever.
Right. You got to start learning your lessons, guys.
And as a good parent, God's pushing them out.
Yeah. And again, not from his full presence, just from full access to him. Like, we still see later on that, like, God's still talking to them. They still have some access to him, but it's not in his perfection like he had designed it to be.
Yeah.
And so we also really wanted to point out here that, like, Adam and Eve went wayward despite God's, like, perfect instruction and provision.
Yeah. They had a freedom to choose. And every student has a freedom to choose. If you had bad parents, if you right now would blame your parents, you're saying, my parents are the reason why I turned out the way I did, I would challenge that.
Right, because you had the choice. You could either imitate them or learn from what they did and do different.
Yeah. You don't get to blame anybody for who you are today. Now, they may have done stuff to you. They gave you a handicap. Yeah, you may have had some bad cards that were dealt to you.
Not saying life's not hard, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But some of the most godly people I know came from the most horrific and wretched situations. And some of the most messed up, crazy people who knew God and fell away.
Had, like, cushiest life with the most loving parents.
And so it's not yes, parenting is important, but parenting is important for the fact of you give them a foundation to jump from. And don't let it be an excuse of, well, I'll just do what I can do, and my kid's ultimately going to choose anyway, so it doesn't really matter how much effort I put into this.
Yeah, you don't get to phone it in.
No, that's ridiculous. But as a child, as somebody I grew up with an amazing set of parents, but still yet there are times where I can make stupid choices that aren't my parents' fault. It's not about...
Right, but even if you fall into, like, some of the same, let's say, weaknesses your parents fell into, that's not their fault. Like, you still got the first-hand view of what it looked like when they fell into that, and it didn't work out for them, but you chose anyway to repeat it. Like, that's just dumb. Like,
yeah, and I understand
this is a bad choice.
And we understand generational curses and generational habits and spiritual warfare on that front. We get that, but we choose. God's not going to bring your parents up while He's judging you and say, "Now, guys, you didn't parent him very good."
It's not like in movies, in therapy sessions where it's like, what's this? Well, my parents did that, like, because of my mom, because of my dad. Like, I'm like this. It's like, that's not going to work.
God's going to hold you accountable and say, I knew what you had. I knew what was dealt to you, and I gave you grace to overcome it. Okay? You were given a measure of grace to overcome whatever has happened and empower you to do greater.
That's right.
And so here, Adam and Eve had sinned and done some broken stuff. They'd had God as their father, as their leader, and still they did broken stuff. Well, now we've got Adam and Eve. They have two sons, Cain and Abel.
Yeah, so we just went from the good and the perfect pre-fall to then the bad of the fall. And then
now we're going to go to the ugly.
The ugly, yeah. And so we're going over to chapter 4. And in chapter 4, we see that Adam and Eve have Cain and they have Abel. We see that Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil.
Yeah.
We see then that they're going to take some of their first fruits and some of the fat portions, and they're going to take them and offer them to God. So again, this is looking like, we might have it together again.
Yeah.
We're being fruitful.
Yeah.
We're multiplying. My kids are offering to God. We're restoring this relationship.
Yeah, and as good parents, you would say, well, okay, my boys saw, we told them the stories. They're learning this lesson that we screwed up and did stuff bad. And I think Abel was like, I don't ever want to do that. I want to please God. And God's right there still, his presence, not like it was in the garden.
Because they're
but
still in
a presence.
Eden, but they're not in the garden that's
Yeah.
in Eden.
But so Abel's got this heart of like, I want to please God. I want to do the right thing. In Cain's heart, though it doesn't say here in Genesis, it does say it.
Yeah,
What'd you
over
say?
in 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. It says, do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous.
So the offering Cain is giving is not an acceptable offering to God. And whether he intended it to be or not is we're not 100% clear, but I'm pretty sure he was just trying to, okay, well, I'll do it because we're supposed to do it.
Well, right. Well, even Hebrews 11:4 says, by faith, Abel offered God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. So we see the faith and we see the heart posture in both of these commentaries on this verse. Like, God could see the heart.
And I think that's the thing. Kids could have the exact same actions. Cain sacrificed to God. Abel sacrificed to God. One was reprimanded and the other one wasn't.
Yeah.
And it came to the heart posture.
Yeah.
When I'm disciplining my kids, I'm really trying to understand the heart behind their action and not just the action. Now, the action may be dumb and I may need to correct the action and say, that's a dumb action, don't ever do it again. But a lot of times it's like, why did you do that? Give me the root of why that came out of you, because I need that to be fixed before we go anywhere else. Because I can correct all the symptoms all day long, but if you don't fix the heart and evil gets in, then you go from being a child of the kingdom to a child of the enemy.
That's right. And so in chapter 4, verse 6, that's what we see is it says, then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? So it's not even like, hey, I didn't accept your offering. Now you're dead to me.
No.
No. It was like, hey, this time, it wasn't great. So like, try again. Next time, have a better heart.
Yeah.
And this will go better for you, you know?
I want to put a pause there. He said accepted, not loved.
Right.
I love you, so I'm telling you this. Why are you sad? Because you didn't accept it. Well, right. If you do the right thing, I will accept it. This is a love motion from God saying,
it's a promise.
I love you so much. I'm trying to show you the right thing here. Then he continues.
Yeah. And he says, but if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. So that's a choice.
Now, I love that verse for the simple fact of it shows us that there's a door. You know, Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. Anybody who would open up and invite me in, I would come in and dine with them. Jesus wants to come and be the Lord of your life. And we've said living in your heart, and there's been theologians who go AWOL about that. Holy Spirit lives and resides inside of me, and wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And so we trust that there is this place that God meets with us inside of us, that the courts of heaven are actually living in me. As they are there, there's this portal in me that gives me access into the throne room of God. But anyways, here Jesus is saying something else is at the door. God is saying this. Something else is at the door. It's trying to come in so it can rule over you.
Right. This is its desire is for you, like to consume you.
Yeah.
This is like this sin here, this crouching, it's like an animalistic thing.
Yeah, like a lion.
Like a lion. Like it's waiting there just to devour. And he's saying like, hey, you have a choice here. Is you can let it devour you. You can give into it, or you can oppose it.
Right.
You can subdue it.
Yeah.
You can rule over it.
Which he had the grace, because God says he could do it.
Yeah.
He had the grace to do it, but he refused to do it.
Right.
I don't care what you're facing today. I don't care what's going on in your life, whether you're a good kid or a bad kid, a good parent or a bad parent, it doesn't matter. you have the grace to overcome whatever obstacles are before you. Even if you created those obstacles, God has allotted grace today for you to overcome those things.
Right.
But what does it look like whenever we don't walk in that grace? Well, it looks ugly.
Yeah, that's the thing is he had a choice. Just like his parents had a choice, this is Cain's specific choice, and he chooses death.
So what's that look like?
Well, it looks like verse 8 says, "Now Cain said to his brother Abel, 'Let's go out to the field.' While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him."
And so this is the moment where you, and I've heard this many times, you've heard it before, but what you do in moderation, those following will do in excess. Disobedience was done first by Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
But because of their disobedience, their pain of their choice trickles down to them reliving it through their son, Cain. Because of what I did here, my children did it worse.
Yeah.
Not just disobedience, but blatant disobedience into murder.
Right, taking another's life.
And whenever there is sin that trickles down, there is a losing of connection and intimacy with God.
Right, which that's what we see too, is that not only was the sin worse or to a higher degree or whatever, however you want to say it, but so were the consequences. Is again, like Adam and Eve were banished from the garden, but they still got to be in Eden. They still got to talk to God, at least sometimes. Maybe it was appointed, I don't know.
I mean, you see God right there talking to Cain.
Right, he's there. But then here in verse 16, it says that God says, you're going to leave. And it says, "So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden." So he's away from God's presence. Mm-hmm. I think that means away. I think it means removed.
Yeah.
Totally. Like he's lost it to an even bigger degree than his parents did.
But it was a willing choice. It was
right.
One of those things
He
where
chose the bad.
Yeah. And the thing is that Abel had the same parents. Seth, who is born after this,
right.
Seth has the same parents who suffer the same issues. And the stories he hears about the past, he has to live out of the knowledge of somebody else's memories. And he does so, and he does it fairly well.
Right.
And so we know that from him we get Enoch and we get
right. Yeah. From
Noah.
Seth's line, we go down, and it's there's some bad in it, obviously, but there's also a lot of good. Where if you just go and finish chapter 4 and just read about Cain's line, like it just gets worse, guys. It gets even more murderous. It gets even more like taking too many wives and all of this stuff. Like it's just the morality is just on decline.
Sin begins to manifold itself.
Yeah.
So we want to encourage you. Boy, this is a lot, wasn't it? Yeah. So we want to.
It's multi-generational.
Yeah, we want to encourage you that if there's good, celebrate the good, live in the good of God. If there's bad, correct it quickly, and don't let it continue to go. And if there's ugly, give it to God.
Yeah, just remember you always have a choice in everything.
As a child, you've got a choice. As an adult, you've got a choice.
Yeah, as parents, we have a choice every day on how we're going to positively or negatively impact our children.
Yeah, so do it for the positive. Give them the best fighting chance they can to live a life of righteousness. If you've messed up, go back and apologize. I don't care if it's been 40 years later. Make the phone calls. I've had so many people say, well, my parent called me and apologized. I heard stories about this. My dad apologized for how mean he was, and I just remember crying on the phone because I never heard him say sorry before.
Right.
My kids hear me say sorry a lot.
We apologize a lot, yeah. And they'll hear things like, hey, mommy and daddy responded badly to that. Here's how we should have responded. Here's what a Jesus reply would have been. And I'm sorry, that we didn't do that right. And we're going to try harder next time. And then our kids become accountability partners for us.
Yeah, that's not my favorite.
Because then they'll be like, hey, are you supposed to be? And I'm like, oh, you're right. That was not the right response. Like, nothing is more humbling.
My response is, that's none of your business. I'm an adult. I know what I'm doing. Do what you're supposed to do. Go talk to your mom. Okay, with that, guys, good, bad, and the ugly. We hope you enjoyed this first video. We're going to try to make the other ones a little bit shorter, but this one was a really big one. We wanted to get through all the generations of God, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and show you that when it comes to parenting, boy, it trickles down.
Yeah.
It trickles down.
Choices matter. And just be encouraged today. And we hope that this helps you want to go and be more involved and more just dig deeper in your word.
Yep. So, love you all. See you tomorrow for part
guys.
2 of
Yay.
our Parents of the Bible,
Yep.
the good, bad, and the
Ugly.